What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. I am your host, Mundungus Creevy. Alongside me, as always, Cameron Parker and Gage Madrid. Obviously, we're missing Glenn. I'm eating my tapioca pudding. Hauser, but it's fine. He's on a work thing. He's in Vegas. So, he's getting smashed and gambling. I'm just throwing that out there. Chris, if you're watching, my bad. But how are you guys doing?
Great. We have our first victory pod of the season, and it's always great when you have a victory pod, and it's even better when it was a big beatdown of a possible division front runner. So it's gonna be a fun episode, I feel like.
Yep. And I feel like I already said we need to just knock out all the negative stuff now, get it out of the way. That way we can have fun on this podcast and actually go through all the positive stuff. Because if there was one game we were looking for where we can say this team as a collective unit took a step forward, it was this game. So I'm feeling good right now because the team has given us reason for hope and optimism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this is the thing, right? Like, when you go and you make your season predictions for how the Broncos are going to do, right? I'm thinking 11-6, right? But I'm thinking 11-6 because this is how I thought the team was going to look in game 1 and 2. But that's not what we got. So let's break down the negatives. I think there's like 2 that we were talking about beforehand. If there's more, just throw them in there. But I think number 1, you're looking at Luke Wattenberg as the starting center. He didn't allow a pressure in this game, but he is getting beat a lot in the 3 games that we've played. And not only Luke Wattenberg, but the line as a whole, right? Like Wattenberg, Bowles, we can bring up McGlinchey and how he's not playing, and how we thought Palchevsky played. We'll just kind of hit the line first.
Yeah, I will say, as far as the negatives, the Luke Wattenberg thing is a bit low on the negatives, because he has played well, but he has had some gaffes. As we were talking about before the pod, where you do kind of see, there were some missteps and some unfortunate, if you will, just him not standing upright, and as a result, he got knocked down on his face. But so yeah, that's a negative, but I think you are seeing a lot of positives still in pass protection, and you're seeing a lot of strides within the run game. But I think there's probably some communications that are lacking with, Wattenberg and everything, but I think that's going to come with some time. This is a guy who, he plays both guard and he plays center. So I think that's going to, have the chance to get up. But I think that all in all, just the offensive line in general is actually far more of a positive right now, even with McGlinchey still in that lineup, and even with Bowles there. I mean, it was still a little bit of a positive, from where things were currently sitting. So I do think it's a bit lower on some of the negative side of things.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that Luke Wattenberg has made strides over these 3 games. I thought that he played really well, actually, in week 1. I thought he was probably the best lineman out there week 1, considering just how miserable it was at times, with Miners having a really crappy game. Bowles has been crappy pretty much all season long. I thought that week 1, Wattenberg played pretty well. Last week, okay, there were some gas, some snafus here and there, but just like Cam said, I think that's lower on the priority list because we're seeing a collective body of growth with him. I think if you're really pointing to a big issue on the offensive line right now, it's got to be Garrett Bowles.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he has not played well these past 3 weeks, and some of those holding calls are just a result of, Bonick scrambling out. I think, was that Parrott or was that Bowles who caught the one on the scramble? That was Parrott? Okay. But I know there's another hold out there. It was one where he just got absolutely destroyed, had to hold in order to prevent Nick's head getting chopped off. those are ones you're just going to have to learn to live with. But him getting beat at the line of scrimmage consistently, that's a problem. And I feel like Garrett Bowles is the clear and obvious weak link right now in the offensive line. The fact that we saw Alex Palczewski come in at right tackle and there was no drop-off from Mike McGlinchey. You could argue that Palczewski played even better than McGlinchey has in these past couple of games. That gives you promise for the future that you might have something long-term at right tackle. And given the fact that Bowles is going to be a free agent this year, the Broncos are probably going to let him walk. Do they have the conversation of maybe moving Mike McGlinchey to left tackle next year because he did play there at points in college, whereas Alex Palczewski, he looks like a more natural right tackle. I think you keep him there. So the fact that Palczewski played so well gives you some flexibility on the offensive line, but right now, Garrett Bowles has been a clear and obvious weak link on that unit.
Yeah, so obviously going back to Palczewski and how he played in replacement of McGlinchey. Gage, you had that video out on Broncos Syndicate about whether we should be looking at Palczewski to start for the future. And you basically broke down like we need to see him over these next 3-4 games because he's going to be going against better pass rushers. So we see how he holds up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Max Crosby. I feel like the Chargers, the Raiders, those teams are going to scheme up matchups. And then the Jets as well. They've got some pass rushers that could potentially give Alex Palczewski fits. So these next 3-4 games, if he can hold up against superior competition to the Buccaneers edge rush unit, I do think that will give you a more clear picture about where Palczewski could sit long term. But what we saw against Tampa Bay, who does have a very strong defensive scheme with Todd Bowles, Bowles was trying to get matchups with Palczewski, knowing he was making his first start at right tackle. And he held up about as well as you could ask him to hold up. That gives you a lot of optimism.
Yeah, and that was without Vita Vea, right?
And Kalijah Kancey as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there is at least a window of opportunity where you at least entertain a very unusual thought. Now, granted, does it happen? It is very, very rare. But as we're talking about, the Broncos moving on from Garrett Bowles, I think it's very easy, and it's very easy to predict it happening, at the very end of the season. But if this progresses just a little bit and we do see more growth from Palczewski at right tackle, it wouldn't hurt to have some entertaining offers as the season is progressing and as things are going close to the trade deadline, meaning the Mike McGlinchey to left tackle situation could get jump-started a little bit sooner rather than later. So, meaning – let's just say the Cincinnati Bengals are progressing and they're not looking at all what they should be looking at. Maybe you ship him off to the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's their left tackle with the Cincinnati Bengals. It would feel like a very competitive move to a certain degree for them. Right. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Cincinnati liked him coming out of Utah, at least early in, and so I think they probably still like him now. But I think that is certainly something that bears watching. And does it happen? It's very rare, but it is something that is at least you should at least file away in a sense of come trade deadline. Because there was one player who was maybe disappointing in the first 2 weeks that was actually a positive on the offensive side of the ball. In a game against Tampa that we felt like might actually end up being on the trade block, mid-season or something like that. So, but yeah, it was a very disappointing start, I felt like, for Bowles specifically.
Yeah. And I do think that another team that could bear watching for Garrett Bowles could be the Chicago Bears. I think that if they want to bolster the protection for Caleb Williams, that could totally make sense. Because
they can't do any worse than what they've got. So.
No, they really can't.
they're too focused on posing in the red zone than after they run a speed option, versus actually blocking.
And we'll talk about all that because around the end of the show, I kind of want to talk about contenders and pretenders, and we'll just go with like the top one or top two, like only 6 or 7 teams, not that many. But moving on to probably the biggest negative that we have right now, and that's a starting running back. We all love Javonte. Javonte had a great rookie year, and I know that before the show we were talking about what the issue might be, and I brought up that I didn't think he was a scheme fit. I did hear that from Philip Lindsay on 104.3 The Fan, which I don't listen to, but the clip popped up on my TikTok, so I listened to it. But that's what he was kind of saying was it seems like ever since Peyton got here, it hasn't been a good scheme fit. And we kind of took last year as he's just getting back into the swing of things, trying to find himself, be himself again. But something's just not working. And you had Tyler Bidet come in. And yes, it's Bidet. It's not Beatty. I did it myself. We all did it. Which is weird because last year he said it was Beatty. And then this year he's like, no, it's actually Bidet. Like, okay. So Tyler Bidet was killing it in the game. And I think that he has earned a chance to see what he can do as the starter.
I mean, he's flushing down the doubters. I mean, like,
he's spraying away the haters.
Yeah, you gotta call it for what it is.
Bro's about to get that Charmin endorsement deal.
That's right.
Technically, it doesn't need to be Charmin because you don't need Charmin when you got the Bidet on the
field. But I think that my take is it's gonna sound like a Tyler Bidet hater to a degree, but like it's the running back room in general for me. Like it's just they lack a dog at running back one. They really do, and it's not. But I think where it really favors a guy like Bidet is when you have the room that they have, which is not a clear running back one, or to a certain argument, like the Broncos, but that's more of a positive on the wide receiver front after this last game. They don't have a dominant wide receiver one. Well, they also don't have a dominant running back one either right now, unfortunately, with the way the performance is with Javonte.
And we haven't seen Estime because he's been hurt too.
And I think that it's going to be begging the question now. I think that Estime still, from the way that I viewed it, was more about Pirine in the grand scheme of things. But the way things on it, you also have to look at it in the lens of right now, the way things are unfolding and the way that things are unfolding right now with Javonte. Once Estime comes back, which is in a couple weeks, you do have to ask the question, should Estime be your running back one once Javonte, once he's back and once he's fully healthy? And hopefully Estime can hurdle the competition again without fumbling.
Yeah. And for me with Tyler Beatty, it's just the size. Kind of the Philip Lindsay problem.
Bidet!
Oh, damn it. Tyler Bidet. For me,
the thing
issue
that sprays your butthole. Just remember that.
God damn it, Mike.
What? What? That's why you don't need Charmin.
Oh my god.
Maybe a little bit just to dry it off, but you can't dry it. But the bidet gets in the hole.
Oh shit.
If you can't afford it, you get one of those removable shower heads and just bend over in the shower. Use the jet stream.
It's over.
Just right into the ditch.
Oh my god.
If you would have just said bidet right the first time, I wouldn't have had to bring it up.
Okay, so Tyler Bidet, it's the size for me. It's the Philip Lindsay problem. Can he sustain 15, 20 touches a game? Can he take that much punishment without the injuries starting to stack up? We saw it with Phil. He was a good RB1 option for 2019, but at that point, the team realized, okay, we need to get a bigger body in here, and that led to probably the biggest mistake in the past several years outside of Russell Wilson, and that's bringing in Melvin Gordon.
Mhm.
So I still have questions about that. That's why I do think, like Cam alluded to, we're going to probably be more waiting for Audric Estime before we can completely put Javonte Williams on the bench. He still is probably going to have to serve like a third down pass catching back role. And as much crap as we're giving him for running the football, he did have 4 catches for 29 yards in the game. So he is at least contributing something. Could Javonte, in essence, become the new Samaje Perine, and then Estime become the new Javonte Williams?
Yeah, and I think that the other thing that needs to be mentioned here, I'm going to sound like a hater when I say this because he had a phenomenal touchdown run against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
You missed the booty hole comment, Jeff.
But there is still a little bit of a Jaleel McLaughlin problem. I mean, you got to give kudos where kudos is, and that was as impressive a touchdown run as you will ever see for a score. You know what I mean? Like the ability that was all Jaleel on that touchdown run in a much shorter, condensed area for him to, wiggle away and find a hole, and not really needing a bidet. I mean, like it was just really, really nice to see Jaleel. Really find the score there. So, but nonetheless, you still see a lot of the same issues with him, which is some of the size concerns, and I like how you brought in the Philip Lindsay thing in this, the size. I mean, like, you see some of it. And I think that I'm hoping that some of those pass plays, where you see, the screens and stuff like that, specifically the quick game, which we'll talk about the quick game specifically with the pass game in general, but I'm hoping that they can at least get Jaleel involved in that regard, because I think that, that's where you will really get a chance to possibly see him shine a little bit more, specifically with how they're trying to operate, in that passing game there. But he's still, as well as Javonte, leaving about as well, or leaving a little less than needs to be desired there. And it's just like, so as much as Javonte's been disappointing, and Jaleel's been not that far behind either.
Yeah, and they keep trying to get him on the edge on the outside, and he's just not. That touchdown run was the one time he was able to get out on the edge and make something happen. Other than that, it just doesn't seem like they can get him outside.
Yeah. It feels like Peyton's trying to use him in like a Pierre Thomas, Alvin Kamara type role when he's just not that caliber of player.
You're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy, pal.
No. Okay, so I think those are the negative. Any other negatives I'm not thinking of?
I think we're good. I think we can get into the fun part now.
I think that's about it. Well, I do want to talk about one more thing before we do that. Because we talked about
bidets.
No, last week. We didn't talk about bidets last week. We talked about Tua and the Miami Dolphins, and now we got Skylar Thompson, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He's hurt now, and there's rumors, and I know that, Gage, you put out a story about this as well.
A rumor.
That the Dolphins could try to make a trade, or should make a trade, or try to make a trade for Zach Wilson.
Yeah. So Adam Schefter went on the Pat McAfee show, I believe it was yesterday, and he said that Tua is still probably going to be a while. Just the language that he was talking, the tone in his voice, what he was insinuating. We're probably not going to see Tua Tagovailoa for the foreseeable future, at least the next 3 weeks as he's on injured reserve. Skylar Thompson probably not going to play this week with his chest injury. And Mike, cue the clip, please.
Who's he? You got to give me more heads up than that.
Absolute booty cheeks. That would describe Skylar Thompson's performance before getting hurt against the Seattle Seahawks. So the Dolphins are in a bit of a mess right now with the quarterback position. And Shefty said there are 3 teams that the Dolphins could potentially call. The Pittsburgh Steelers with Russell Wilson, because he's obviously not going to start in Pittsburgh anytime soon.
Yeah, I'll take Skylar Thompson over him any day.
The Cleveland Browns with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He is also, I mean, he's an intriguing option, but behind Clown Face and behind Jameis Winston, he's not going to probably see the field either. So that's
why him and not Winston though? Do you know?
You could even argue, Jameis too.
Yeah, true. Yeah, maybe Jameis, but I think he's actually got a potential opportunity to play here pretty soon because that Browns offense is historically bad.
Hold on. Now, see, you gave me a lead in.
Absolute booty cheeks.
There we
go. There you go. But the other name that Shefty insinuated was Zach Wilson. Call up Denver and say, hey, what would you take for Zach Wilson? I got to be honest, I don't think the Broncos are going to part ways with him. They like him. Mm-hmm. They think that he can be a long-term backup quarterback option at bare minimum. Mm-hmm. He's a great asset to have in the room. And additionally, if they were to let him go this offseason and he gets like a Sam Darnold type deal, the Broncos could recoup a compensatory draft pick back. Now, there is the other side of it where, okay, do they want to expedite that return and maybe get some draft capital for this upcoming draft? That way, they'll be able to maybe facilitate their rebuild a little bit more and add some more pieces to this roster. I don't know. But if I'm George Payton and Sean Payton right now, just based on the way that we gave Zach Wilson all of that love and all of that hype this offseason, saying we really like our quarterback room, I don't think I'd be in a position to move on from Zach.
Yeah.
Would Stidham be an option? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Maybe.
That's where I was actually going to be going. And I think
and completely off of the Broncos, but Bryce Young?
Maybe. That's one thing that Schefter did also allude to was teams have called about Bryce Young, but it seems like they're much like the new Browns, very uninclined to move, Bryce Young at this point, given he's in timeout, treating him like he's in, kindergarten, so, but I think that how the Broncos should operate this is to a certain degree, like, maybe kind of like how it seems it went down with the wide receiver room with Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. You redirect it from Courtland Sutton to Jerry Jeudy, like they have a phone call about, Zach Wilson, and then the Broncos just redirected to Jarrett Stidham. And frankly, I actually would love the fit of Jarrett Stidham with Miami. I really think that he would kind of flourish a little bit with Mike McDaniel there, specifically with how he operates and, how he is as a processor. I actually wouldn't mind that one bit. And again, like I think that, like what Gage was talking about, I do think the Broncos view the whole Zach Wilson situation as a long-term situation where he's the new Bubby Brister. He's the new, he's the new Gary Kubiak, if you will, to Bo Nix. And I think that one of the reasons why I was such a big proponent of the idea of the 3-quarterback system this year was the idea to let Zach Wilson grow, because I think that stylistically, both Zach Wilson and Bo Nix make for a great room. They complement each other so well with the idea of what they want to run for an offense. And so I think that for what they can do, I think that, they do see that vision for him, whether that is a spot starter here and there or, the ability to run some of that same offense. So I think that, for that, I love the idea of just really kind of just keeping Zach as much as you can and holding in all the cards so that when it gets to that point that you possibly need to move on from him, you get a little bit more than a 4th-round draft pick. You get a little bit more, than, a late day, a late day 3 pick, or an early day 3 pick, late, day 2 pick. So I think in the long run, it actually has a chance to very much favor the Broncos in that regard.
I think right now, if you were to flip Zach, you could probably get like a conditional 6 that could maybe become a 5th with playing time and incentives. But if you were to hold on to Zach, let him develop a little bit more, and maybe next year extend him and possibly trade him then you could maybe pump up his value a little bit to a 4th, maybe even a 3rd.
Where it gets interesting, I will say where it gets interesting is hypothetically, let's just say the Broncos signed Zach Wilson to the exact same deal that they signed Jarrett Stidham. Let's just say that. At that point, you are looking at something that's a very unique situation where on face value, they don't want to move on from Zach at all.
Yeah. All right, one last thing, and then we'll get into it. I swear, I promise. Mike Kliss reported the Broncos worked out inside linebacker Quan Alexander. They mentioned
Good
earlier in this season or the preseason that they were going to continue to look at inside linebacker. Is this a depth thing? Is this a replacing Singleton, or that bidet thing is still spinning in my head. Singleton, or is it a Barton thing, or what would it be if we brought in Quan Alexander?
It smells like a depth thing to me. I can tell Cam and I are going to disagree on this one. I don't like this purely because of the injury history with Quan Alexander. He's had multiple hamstring injuries, torn pec, torn ACL, and most recently last year in week 10, a torn Achilles when he was playing with the Steelers. That for me is enough to keep me away. There is that history there with Sean Payton. He played for the Saints in 2020 through 2021. So that probably is the tie that would send Quan Alexander here to Denver. I'm not a huge fan of it. He's a good player when healthy, but I'm not a huge fan of players that have the when healthy asterisk attached to them.
But they also don't have the legend Bo Lowry in the room either. So, but it's a very it's still very noteworthy that like the injuries, it's a concern. My biggest worry, not injury related, but my biggest worry is that I'm hoping this is not a opponent signing. I think too often, sometimes you see an opponent come in here, or a former player of an opponent come in here, and he basically just stays 1 week, and then they move on from him. I will say I don't think Quan Alexander is that kind of player. I think that and specifically when he played with the Jets in 2022, and kind of a lot has changed to a certain degree, with the Jets. So, but to use the win healthy card, there's an argument to be made. There's an argument to be made that he's probably the most talented linebacker on the roster. And I think that where I think that it's at least noteworthy to look into for a guy like Quan. If we are nitpicking, and I like how we're talking about this, we're getting rid of the negatives first. If we're nitpicking the defense of where things are going with where we're at, the weakest link of this defense is still that inside linebacker position. And so I think that having someone who truly can complement Alex Singleton, I think is going to be a big benefit for a guy like that. And I think that Quan, as you get older, the instincts get a little bit better. The smarts of playing in the NFL get a little bit better. So I think that he's a bit of a better coverage linebacker than Alex Singleton. He's really good with run fits. So I think that, he would mesh, I think, really well here. And long run, I actually like the idea of having him in the building because this is a case where he can really kind of help them continue to mold into the idea of like the foundation of what Sean Payton really wants. And because at the end of the day, that's the fixture of everything that we are looking for is the foundation of Sean Payton.
Cops are chasing.
It was a fire truck.
Wee-oo. All right, so we say all of the negatives, and we're going to kind of stick with the defense. We say all the negatives to go into the positives.
That's right.
We had a lot of discussions in the preseason to try to figure out which corner was going to be cornerback 2. Week 3's PFF's highest graded corner, Riley Moss.
We should put the emphasis on that in the entire
NFL.
The entire NFL was Riley Moss. I mean, like he is. Look, we'll talk about the quarterback position, about stacking days and everything. It applies for a guy like Riley Moss, And I think that what we're starting to see is everything that we were hoping to see with him last year, with the possibility of him playing and being healthy, because I think, and Mike and I know this, unfortunately, getting the chance to watch Iowa games. But the one beautiful thing about that defense is they are such a well-coached football team. And specifically, you factor in, call it for what it is. The Jim Leonard symbiotic relationship that I think that he has there. I think that you are really starting to see him play exceptional football, to where you are starting to see something that maybe the Broncos haven't exactly had, because he's not really a rookie. He's not really a rookie, but I think that he's playing really well in his second year, which is, you couldn't say the same thing for another former Iowa cornerback, and, Michael Orange Juice. I just think it's just very unfortunate with how things all unfolded with Ojimudi. But Riley, he's technically sound, he's athletic. Apparently the stream agrees with me. I just think that,
dang it, mine doesn't do
that. But I just think that he's just so technically sound with everything that he does, and more importantly, when you do play at Iowa, the instincts and the IQ of you as a football player, it's there. It's one of the things that they rave about. So that forced fumble that he had on Cade Otton, where he literally punches the football out, that is a high IQ play by a second-year player that you see possibly in his fourth year. So he's a exceptional corner right now.
Textbook peanut punch. And the completions that he's giving up are like perfectly timed chemistry completions between quarterback and receiver that I thought Matt Millen said it best. It's basically indefensible.
Yeah.
So if that is what you're giving up, then I'm sorry, you've got a stud there at the second boundary corner spot. He is doing everything that you could ask of him to do. I've been really impressed, again, like you said, Cam, with his technique. He's fundamentally sound. He doesn't get his hips turned. He doesn't bite on double moves. That's really good to see, man. He's been so sound. And now that you combine him, Pat Surtain, and Jaquan McMillan, the Broncos have a formidable cornerback tandem right now.
And actually, Levi Wallace is playing pretty solid too as well. So it's just like, what gets you excited is, like, when you think of long term, and with what we saw with the preseason, you enter Chris Abrams-Drain to the mix. Which, by the way, like, very subtly, the play of Riley Moss, the play of Jaquan McMillan, the play of Levi Wallace, you can already start to kind of see, okay, this is why Chris Abrams-Drain is inactive. They're playing at such a high level. But yeah, you get to the point where you really start entering the conversation of, I'm really excited about that secondary. And I think that of the takeaways of that game, I am very excited. I am very excited about that secondary room, because one of the big matchup problems that I was looking forward to was that wide receiver room with that secondary. So that their performance there gives me actually a bit of some hope going into this Jets game, because now you have the chance to really kind of mix and match a little bit with some of the cornerback twos like Moss and Jaquan, and you really have the chance to really mix and match there. So I think that having that and how well they have played gives you the chance to actually have something you really haven't had the last couple times when you played the Jets.
Yep. Yeah. I do think schematically it's going to be a bit of a different game plan to beat the Jets. We saw Vance Joseph lighting up the Buccaneers with blitzes, and Aaron Rodgers this season has been one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL against the blitz. So I saw a tweet earlier, I want to say it was from Robbie NFL, that the Broncos should run a lot more simulated pressures, try to get pressure with four men, which I do believe they can. They showcase that they can do that. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, as opposed to blitzes, trying to get pressure with extra rushers. I just think that with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, he knows where you're going to blitz from, and he knows how to replace it with a throw. Baker Mayfield, I'm not saying he's bad at that, but it was just a different game plan going into this Tampa Bay Buccaneers game than I think we're going to see against the New York Jets.
Yeah. So Grace Through Faith asked us a question, and I'm going to respectfully as I can answer it. No. No. And that's not even including who I thought had a great game, Brandon Jones back there at safety.
Another
obviously,
another one, Mike, by the way, who was voted as the top defender.
Yeah.
For the entire NFL.
And this is someone coming in to replace Justin Simmons, who's arguably one of the greatest safeties that the Broncos have had.
Top two.
You got, three.
Top two.
I mean, John Lynch, Brian Dawkins. I'm just saying. But, I mean, Justin
Is Lynch
Simmons.
really a Bronco, is he a Buccaneer, though?
Good point. But,
It's
I mean, you can say the same thing for Brian Dawkins, too.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. But, I mean, you have Justin Simmons, who was the best safety over the last, 4 years?
Yeah.
And now you got Brandon Jones coming in. I thought he had a great game.
Yeah. He did. Being a part in 2 turnovers. The read on that interception was nuts. First of all, the disguised coverage on that was insane. I mean, made it look like it was going to be cover 1 man, and then you back out into this cover 2, and Baker has no idea it's coming. He's trying to take advantage of a matchup between Jaquan McMillan and Mike Evans, and Brandon Jones just jumps it and picks it off. It was an insane read by him. So,
and I think that's where it gets a bit interesting, where you don't really lose anything necessarily with a guy like Justin Simmons, because one of the things that you did see for some of the stints and some of the shorter stints that he did have at Miami, you saw a very athletic profile. And I think that as we talk about, it seems like it's a bit of a thing, but like a symbiotic relationship a little bit. PJ Locke played with him at Texas. So, I mean, they already kind of know each other quite well, so I think kind of going back to that, I think that, back to what we talked about when that signing happened, having that ability to know the chemistry specifically on the back end is a very underrated trait and an underrated, thing that they have on that safety room. And so I think that having that relationship is going to bode well for them. And you're already starting to see that. Like when you are 1 to 2 plays ahead of the other, of the offensive team, that's going to benefit you long term. And also for Brandon Jones, I think there were moments where you saw Brandon Jones blitz. You saw moments where you saw PJ Locke blitz. So, I mean, there's going to be very creative ways with how they get Brandon Jones involved, with this team. So I very much am excited about the possibilities for Brandon. I think he's actually getting to the point where he's an X factor with this defense going forward.
Yeah. And so continuing on the defensive theme, I kind of want to talk to everyone over the first 2 weeks. I was talking about Vance Joseph and how he should be fired. He should be let go because he sucks and the defense is horrible. After 3 weeks, Denver is number 3 in yards allowed. They are number 5 in sacks.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time we said that? Our pass rush has been horrible over the last forever, except for 2015. And now we're top 5 in the league. We had, 7 sacks this last game? Everybody was eating.
Last time we had a pass rush was prime Von Miller, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that 2018 season with him and Bradley Chubb, where they each had double-digit sacks. But ever since then, it's been kind of a pass rush desert here in Denver. I don't think we've seen players with multiple double-digit sacks since that 2018 season. And I think we could very easily see that this year. And it might not be from the edge. We could see Zach Allen or even a guy like John Franklin Myers or something like that get 7-10 sacks just because they are getting.
I wasn't crazy when I said it.
No.
I really think that we're getting to the point where, I like Jeff's comment there about, and I think that's one of the things that we were really eyeballing there, which is the interior defensive line is really significantly helping the pass rush of this team on the outside. The more that you can create pressure from the inside, the more opportunities you will have as a pass rusher on the outside. And that's exactly with what we're seeing. And I think that so much so that I think that you are also allowing so many other bodies to get into the backfield. And for anybody that were couch GMs and stuff on social media saying like, that the Broncos don't really have a great interior defensive line or a defensive line in general, y'all can shut up now.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like the defense.
I didn't even say it. You made Cam say it.
Like their defensive line is absolutely legit. They are about 2 or 3 deep now at every single position on that defensive line. You got guys like Malcolm Roach stepping up. You got guys you guys got like DJ Jones, who's starting to make a resurgence now, actually playing really well. And I think that once you play really good complementary football, you start to see the player that you saw in 2022 of how good DJ Jones is. You get a chance to see Zach Allen for the player that he was last year. He's playing even better. Don't tell Pro Football Focus that. But, I mean, like, Zach Allen is playing exceptionally well. And then you get to the pass rush. You get to guys like Jonathan Cooper, who's a maniac. I mean, he's like arguably the best pass rusher in the NFL right now. And then you go to a guy who was playing in the UFL, who was arguably the best defender in the UFL with the Stallions, and that is Dondrea Tillman, who made his presence known, on Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think that you're getting to the point with, all of these players. And obviously I didn't get a chance to say Nick Bonito either. Nick Bonito is playing exceptional with his speed rush. And so I think that's the element of, with the interior defensive line taking the pressure off the outside specifically, but you see it so much with Bonito with his speed rush. And so they have just absolute dudes all across their defensive line. And funny enough, as we're playing the New York Jets this week, we can thank them in large part for John Franklin Myers.
I think he's going to be primed for a big game too. At this point, you have to double team Zach Allen on the interior because he's been an absolute freak. That's giving one-on-one matchups for John Franklin Myers. He turned the Buccaneers right guard into a turnstile last week. And Nick Bonito as well. He's getting those one-on-one matchups, and he's winning with the speed rush. That's what happens when you have dogs on the interior defensive line that can clog gaps, eat up double teams, and really do the dirty work. It's just like comparing it to the 2015 defense. You had Von Miller, Derek Wolfe, Vance Walker, Malik Jackson, DeMarcus Ware. All of those guys worked in unison with each other. The interior guys did all that dirty work, would eat up those double teams so Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware could eat.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, so that covers the defense. And just to kind of end that, everybody talking about Vance Joseph, shut it.
Shut your pie hole.
Shut your pie hole. Shut your booty hole before a bidet shoots a stream of water up in there. How about that? We finally have some good things to say about the offense, minus running back. Bo Nix, I think, looked like he figured it out. I don't know if it was because of play calls. They opened it up a little bit more. I don't know if
Call
that
for
was
what it is
the whole time. I don't know. But there were some design runs. There were some bootlegs. There were some screens. There were deep throws, short throws. There was a mix of everything. Cortland Sutton caught everything his way. Josh Reynolds caught everything his way. You saw them trying to throw the ball out to Mims. You saw them throw the ball out to Troy Franklin. Balls were going to Javonte Williams. Like, it was all over the place. And Bo Nix didn't have a touchdown. But honestly, if we're going to win like that, I don't care.
That's right. And you got to call it for what it is.
I think Sean got on. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Gage. Go ahead.
I think Sean got on Twitter this past week and literally went through every single complaint that the media was making because we saw him shut up pretty much every single hater. Play action. We actually saw quite a bit of play action in this game. Motion, a hell of a lot more motion pre-snap. That was good to see. Some designed QB runs. The freaking read option, bro. Like, Sean heard all of the critics and was like, all right, we'll take this. I'm going to show you. And he called a fucking awesome game against Todd Bowles, who gotta be honest, man, Sean Payton absolutely owns Todd Bowles. He has clowned his defense, man. He knows all of Todd Bowles' tendencies and how to beat him. He had Pat Surtain watch tape of Marshawn Lattimore in bump and run coverage against Mike Evans and utilize some of those principles. And Pat Surtain only allowed one catch on Mike Evans. And even that one was just some soft zone coverage where Evans just caught the ball on the void in the zone, and that was that. It wasn't even really a true one-on-one matchup. So got to be impressed with Sean Payton's ability to really pick apart Todd Bowles' scheme and put Bo Nix in the position to be successful. I can't say that was the case in the Seattle game, and I can't say that was the case in the first half of the Pittsburgh game. I feel like in the second half of the Pittsburgh game is where we actually started to see some signs of life, and then we really saw it all come together in Tampa Bay. I think that Pittsburgh game showed them, all right, we can take this, and this, and build our identity as an offense around it. We now know what we do well. Bo Nix's athleticism. We know that we can attack the intermediate middle of the field on dig routes and stuff like that. The comeback routes, the slants. That is something that we can build an offensive philosophy around. And the first couple of weeks were almost like an extension of the preseason where you're actually going up against real defenses. You're not going up against vanilla stuff like we've seen in the preseason. We can get an identity and a feel of what works against these defenses. And now we're seeing it come together.
Yeah. And I think that, it truly felt like, Sean Payton was literally reading those comments, and basically in that entire, he might've been reading, the 5280 podcast on, for a couple of those people on the 5280 podcast, group text, and really was just like, why don't you guys show it where the sun don't shine, based on the way that he, like the way that he was. I mean, it was just like, it was such a beautiful game plan for the way that he instructed that. I mean, it was, and I think that, you guys know, I'm a big proponent of the mental side of the, sports in general. That meant a lot, I felt like, for me too, on the outside of things, like looking at the fact that, well, one, you're 0-2, and it's always a bad deal when you're 0-3, whether you're a young team, a vet team in general. It's a very bad deal when you are, 0-3. That young team, frankly, needed that type of way that Sean handled that, and they responded. I mean, how often did we see under Russell Wilson him maybe do some of those same things to where he wanted to get a jump start of the offense, and the offense was just putrid coming out of the gate? I mean, so I think that having that for a young team, and specifically for a team that really did need to start off fast, and having that kind of game like that is exactly what the doctor wrote her, because you got a chance to see the aggressive Knicks. You got a chance to see not just the aggressive Knicks, but the calm and poised and accurate Bo Nix that we've been seeing in college. And, and I think that people really got a chance to really see, that Bo actually has a chance to be a weapon. And I think that the thing is that it's going to be very fun to see things develop with him over the course of the season, because he is a mobile quarterback. There's no doubt about it. He's a mobile quarterback, but he is a pass first, surgeon first. And I think that having that ability with the quick strike ability and what fits his processing is going to make him a very almost a dynamic player if he's going to be able to hit things right, because it's going to be very hard to stop. Doesn't really matter to the football team schematically with the way that their offense was running, with the quick passing game and the quick strike offense, that if he figures it out, it's going to be very, very hard, because once they hit that up tempo, specifically, and something we've been clamoring to with at home, they hit the up tempo at home. Bye. Good night. Like, it's exactly like a fast break offense in the national in the NBA. Like, I mean, when you can run up to speed like that and as fast as you can, it's a bad combination. is specifically too, like if he even plays another up-tempo team coming to the altitude, good luck with that, because they're done after like 2-3 drives because they're already exhausted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm not even sure where to go from there. Like, everything was just clicking.
Yep. The receiving core, I thought, was the best game we saw from them. Guys were actually getting open, getting yards after the catch. Shout out little Jordan Humphrey. Shout out Josh Reynolds. I thought both of those
Courtland
guys
Sutton,
played
too.
really well. Courtland Sutton had his best game of the year by far. Looked like the weapon that we actually need him to be. And that's all in unison with each other. It's no coincidence that Bo Nix played well when the offensive line and the receiving core played well. It all has to work in unison like a well-oiled machine. You can't expect one gear to not be churning to make the whole machine work. You know, it all has to work together, and it did in this game.
And I'm not much of a tinfoil hat person, but we saw an uptick in Marvin Mims, didn't we? We saw an uptick in Marvin Mims snaps. So, like, that's another positive here. And, like, Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, I feel like are the X factors for this offense, where the way things are going to be operating going forward, specifically for that up-tempo, because, you know, there were a few times where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers focused a bit on Marvin Mims, and, you know, and granted, that's where, you know, Bo Nix was able to see the read. He was just a bit late out of that. And if he's a bit quicker on that play with where he's able to hit Troy, that's almost a touchdown, you know, if not a very big gain. So just getting Marvin Mims those snaps, which is everything that we've been clamoring basically, you know, since day one, getting him those snaps more and more and more, along with Troy Franklin, more and more and more. I'm telling you, for anybody that kind of was thinking it, Troy Franklin is not going to have the rookie year that I think everybody kind of envisioned at the start of the season. I think he's going to play as much of a role as Marvin Mims with being a decoy or whatever for this offense, and specifically for the tempo of this team.
Yeah. Sean Payton loves his eye candy, and he was using Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin as eye candy. That's something that is going to be huge. And eventually, those guys will get the ball. Like we saw, they tried to get the ball to Troy Franklin on that one play. And again, Bo Nix was just a little bit late with it. We're going to see more and more utilization, I feel like, of those two guys, especially since we saw them in a lot of eye candy roles this past week. I think they might be setting things up for a team like the New York Jets, where you're probably going to need to be able to beat them with speed. That's something that I think is going to be implemented in this upcoming game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that D-Rock and Jeff have it right. Like, we've gotten so used to watching the Broncos like completely bomb in the first couple games. Then they have one game where it's like, oh, we're going to make the playoffs. And then they suck for 3 more games. And then they shoot up and we're thinking, oh, playoffs again. And then 5 games later, we look like the worst team in the league. So I think Jeff and D-Rock have it right. Like, we need to see if we can get 2 in a row, 3 in a row, 4 in a row. And I'm not saying like win 2, 3, 4 in a row, but like look the same.
Yeah.
Instead of having the huge fall off offensively or defensively, if we can keep it consistent. Now, the defense has been consistent for these 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
They looked a lot better in this one because the pass rush figured it out. Interior defensive line figured it out. The blitzing was phenomenal. Like, we were able to get it figured out. So now
the offense was sustaining drives to keep them fresh.
Right.
Yes.
So now that the offense has figured out, at least we hope, something, now we have to see if they can maintain that and build on it.
And this is a nice little callback to the very beginning of this conversation and from those positives. I mean, like, starting from the fact that they were able to get the ball first and that they were able to basically punch them in the mouth, because you typically hear it in terms of they punched them in the mouth on the defensive side of the ball. They punched them in the mouth immediately on the offensive side of the ball. And specifically from a young team's standpoint on the offensive side of the ball, which is led by your quarterback, I cannot say it enough. That was such an important game for Bo Nix specifically, because having that kind of game before he's getting ready to go up against the New York Jets, like it's a big deal. And yes, it was desperation. I mean, like, And so I think that, when you have that kind of confidence and when you have with the kind of play that they backed it up with, that is going to speak volumes for this team, win or lose, for how the resolve that they're going to be as a football team, and specifically Bo Nix's development. This game, I think, is going to go a very long way for Bo and, Sean Davis-Webb, Joe Lombardi, everybody else there. We may be looking back at this game as the one that was the jumpstart for everything else that happened this year.
Yeah. So going into the Jets game, I know Aaron Rodgers is really good against the blitz because it's Aaron Rodgers. He's been in the league for 75 years. He's seen everything that we're going to throw at him. But you still have a Jets offensive line that has some weaknesses. They have some issues. And I think that if we're able to continue with the interior defensive line pressure and being able to get those pass rushers their lanes to go ahead and get at that quarterback, I think we're going to be okay.
Yep. I do think one matchup that we might want to look at is John Simpson. He's a good player, but he's probably the weak link on that interior offensive line right now at left guard. So maybe try to scheme some matchups to maybe get like Zach Allen or John Franklin Myers or maybe DJ Jones or Malcolm Roach on him. That could be a possible matchup because they really tried to take advantage last week of Cody Mock, the Buccaneers' right guard. They turned him into a turnstile. I again think Simpson's a better player than Mock is, but that could be probably the weak link on that offensive line that you could look at and say, okay, let's see if we can scheme him up here.
And oh, by the way, Morgan Moses is injured and he's out, and he's going to be out for this game. So hopefully, the Broncos defensive line can, really get to the point where they're creating so much pressure that you see them fall down, much like the camera that Gage was just having on stream. It's just it's falling down. But like they need to create as much pressure as they can, and I think that the best way schematically, that they need to do this is, you hate living in the past, but the way that they need to do this is they need to operate it within the same point of view as the 2015 game when the Broncos played the Packers, which is you got to keep Aaron Rodgers within the pocket. You keep him within the pocket, and you're able to create that pressure either in his face, inside of it. You'll have a much better time of winning the football game. Right now, Aaron Rodgers is playing at an elite level. You got to call it for what it is. He's playing at a very elite level, and I think at some point, we also have to understand that he's going to get his. And so you got to it's the Patrick Mahomes argument. You got to keep him inside. You got to keep him contained inside the pocket. And I think that, you got to be able to hit him in the mouth as much as you can, create a lot of pressure so that, and obviously too, as a defensive back unit, be sticky on all those, the wide receivers that they have. And I think that that's why it was so encouraging for what we saw from the secondary against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, led by Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer and Chris Godwin. That's a pretty solid wide receiving core. So now you got guys like Garrett Wilson, who's probably going to get followed by, PS2 the entire game. So now it's going to become, well, how will they deal with a really big-bodied, Alan Lazard? They're going to have a safety on him. Like how exactly are they going to be having that type of matchup? So Lazard, and then they have some other wide receivers. Maybe they sprinkle Malachi Corley in here. I just is a very, not expecting it, but maybe they sprinkle Corley in here. So I really think that we got to be cognizant too is just the fact that Rodgers is playing at a very elite level, and so if he plays really well, we shouldn't be surprised about it at all.
D-Rock wants to know who we think Bo Nix's first passing touchdown will go to. He says Dulcich. I say Reynolds.
I want it for the story. I want it to be Troy Franklin.
I'm gonna say Cortland Sutton.
Yeah. But as far as to answer the question, I think it's I will actually say it's going to be Javonte Williams.
Interesting.
Ooh. When we spanked Rodgers a few years ago, was VJ a coach?
That was Wade Phillips.
Yeah. Well, and we're going against an offensive coordinator who, to be honest, is collecting a paycheck and not really doing anything. Like, we all know that it's Aaron Rodgers' show, and Nathaniel Hackett is just riding the coattails.
Yeah, and that's the other part, as Jeff was mentioning there. That's maybe the biggest takeaway there is they've got to stop the running game. You know, Breece Hall and specifically Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen is the one that I'm kind of focused on to a certain degree more, just because he's such a bigger body. He's a very young, you know, size-wise of a Derrick Henry. I mean, like he's very athletic for his size too. And I think at this point, you also got to call it for what it is with that tandem, and that is maybe one of the best tandems right now in the early part of the National Football League. Like they look really, really good, and so they've got to be able to stop the running game also.
Yep.
All right, so predictions for the Broncos versus the Jets. What are we thinking?
Time to rain on the parade. I have to pick the New York Jets. I just think that they're the better football team. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have answers for this defense. I think that their defense is extremely formidable. I think the Broncos are going to put up a good fight. But I do have the New York Jets winning this game because they just match up better than the Broncos do on both sides of the ball, quite frankly.
If it turns into a defensive battle, I think that, you know, it could get to the point where the Broncos at least have a chance. And I think if the Broncos also put up 23 to 24 points, I actually think there's a pretty good chance that they could win this game. So I do think it gets there, unfortunately. And with everything that after last week, I will say it's a loss too. But I think the Jets are the better football team, and but I think it's gonna be close. I'm actually going to go with something that you never see lately with the Broncos Jets game, and I think you're going to see 27 to 24 Jets.
I think it's Broncos 23-21. We win by a safety. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. For me, I don't think that there's enough receiving options for Rodgers that aren't going to be covered by. I think the three best corner tandem or trio in the league, right? Like I just McMillan, Moss, PS2. By that point, the pass rush is already to you. So I'm going Broncos 23, Jets 21.
It's gonna be fun.
It is going to be fun. All right, let's close this thing out with a contenders pretenders kind of thing. I'm going to go through the division leaders, and we'll kind of figure out whether they're actually a good team or just being helped by a poor schedule or getting really lucky. So let's kick it off with the AFC East. You got the Buffalo Bills at 3-0.
They're contenders.
Yeah. I will say I'm cautious. I will say contenders just because it is Buffalo and they have a tendency to kind of slip up here and there. But I think for right now, I will say contenders.
They showed last night what they're capable of, and if they can play like that, then they could beat anybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think contenders for the Bills. AFC North, you're looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Pretenders.
I agree.
Without even a question.
Well, yep. And it's not about, maybe us being biased to a certain degree of like maybe still, the Steelers and everything, but it's just like Justin Fields is having a great start of the season. I mean, like you got to call it, he's having it, but like their offense is still kind of meh. It's also they want to call out the Broncos for being, kind of vanilla and everything. Like, once you look at the mirror right now, like it's it's going to get to the point where I think it's going to rear its ugly head and they kind of come down to earth just a little bit.
They're averaging 1 touchdown a game.
Mm-hmm.
And their schedule to end the year is a gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
They've got Ravens, they've got Bengals, and I think the Bengals are going to get better. They've got Chiefs in the back end of their schedule. They've got some daunting opponents coming up.
All right, AFC South, Houston Texans, 2-1.
I still say pretenders. I mean,
Pretenders?
Sorry, contenders. Sorry.
I mean, yeah, they've got to be contenders. They have one of the best dynamic offenses in the league. They did have some issues against the Vikings, but quite frankly, Brian Flores' defensive scheme has given some of the best offense in the NFL fits. So I think that they're going to be just fine. It was a bad loss. They're going to flush it. They're going to move on to next week, and they're going to get back on track.
Okay. I think pretenders. I'm not a big Texans fan.
Hater.
I'm not there. A little bit.
Later.
AFC West Chiefs. Come on.
Pretenders.
Shut up.
Poor pretenders. No, they're the Chiefs. They'll always be contenders as long as Andy Reid's the head coach and Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback.
And then not to mention, too, they have the refs on their side.
Yeah,
Facts.
that too.
They're on the payroll. At least they're on somebody's payroll because it ain't the NFL's. NFC East, Washington Commanders, 2-1, leading the division.
Jaden Daniels looks really good. He and Bo Nix are actually the better rookie quarterbacks right now in the NFL because Caleb Williams looks like absolute booty cheeks.
You can't say it. And I mean,
absolute booty cheeks.
You got to give me warning on these things.
But I'm just also going to call it for what it is, and it's a rookie quarterback, so I will say pretenders.
I'm going to say contenders because I think Jaden Daniels is that dude.
I think he is, but I just think that it might be a little bit too early for the conversation, and so I think that saying pretenders or even contenders isn't that bad of it.
Yeah. I'm going to say contenders for one reason only.
You love Dan Quinn.
Well, facts. But when you look at the division, you have the Eagles and then you have the Giants and the Cowboys. So the Giants and the Cowboys, I think, are worse than the Commanders. And so you're competing with the Eagles for the division. So I think that there's a shot that they are a wild card team, which would make them contenders. So that's what I'm going with. But the first point, yeah, I like Dan Quinn. Sorry.
No,
like listen, you saw the Cowboys' defensive fall off when he left. I'm just throwing that out there.
But I wouldn't necessarily say you like Dan Quinn. You love Dan Quinn.
I love Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn and Sam Hartman on the same team. Oh God.
Yeah, I think
turn my camera off and leave me alone for a little bit.
Every Valentine's Day, Mike writes letters not just to his own wife, but he writes letters to Dan Quinn.
I don't even send it to my wife.
Wow.
Just Dan Quinn and Sam Hartman. That's it.
That too. I forgot about the Disney Prince.
Right,
Mike, you better just become a Commanders fan at this point.
I probably should. Then I got to rename the network, though. NFC North, Minnesota Vikings, 3-0.
People aren't gonna like this, but I think they're pretenders. And I think that Sam Darnold is playing really well right now. I think Kevin O'Connell is putting him in a position to be successful, but will there be a point where teams start to figure the Vikings out a little bit? I don't know. Now, they've got Justin Jefferson. They've got Jordan Addison. They've got the great pieces there. I just wonder, it's like, how sustainable is this really going to be? They've got to go into Lambeau next week where the Green Bay Packers are playing some damn good football, even without Jordan Love, and Love should be back this week. Sam Darnold is beat up going into this game. I don't know, man. I think we're going to find out some things about the Minnesota Vikings this week up at Lambeau.
I will say pretenders right now for the Vikings, just because like it's more about like the wait and see. Washington, Vikings, like it's wait and see for me. Not discounting at all what's happened the last 3 weeks, but just I want to see it. I just want to see it as things progress. And that said, though, The Broncos didn't sign him, but the Broncos look like geniuses, kicking the tires on Sam Darnold before they went and got out and got Bo Nix. So something to file away. Like the Broncos and the Vikings were the only teams that badly wanted Darnold.
Yeah. At this point, I got to go with contenders. I mean, you're looking at the third lowest points allowed, and you're looking at the second most points scored. I mean, you're like the differential here between points is 55. That's the second highest in the NFL right now. So they're doing it not only on offense but on defense as well. Until they stumble, I gotta go contenders.
And at least early on, I say it early on, there might be a little bit of a quarterback conundrum right now if this thing progresses because because Sam Darnold is going to make it exceptionally hard for the Vikings to move on from him.
Yeah. Ooh, Spence says Vikings offense pretenders, Vikings defense contenders. I don't know, man. The Sam Darnold thing's got my head spinning. Like, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
NFC South, New Orleans Saints, 2-1.
I mean, if you had asked me this 1 week ago, I would have said contenders, but they fell flat on their face against Philadelphia. Their offense couldn't sustain production that they had the past couple of weeks. Derek Carr threw an interception to end the game. I don't know, man. I think they're starting to turn into a pumpkin a little bit. I'm going to kind of lean towards pretenders right now.
I think actually the entire NFC South is starting to kind of show its hand again.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say the Falcons specifically kind of, were a bit, going toe to toe with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think a lot of that actually had to do with that guy right there, having a lot of history with Mahomes. But as far as just the Saints are concerned, Derek Carr also, he's been an underrated quarterback to a degree, but he's also not a quarterback that has been known to kind of carry teams either, and so I think where it gets to the point of them actually being contenders is the defense. Like the defense is probably the one area where you might say, okay, they're at least early on in the season that they have the chance to be, contenders, but the entire division in general is just sadly right now, full of pretenders.
But to be fair, Derek Carr is the best quarterback of the Raiders. Like,
goes to show you how bad their
quarterback is. If he was on the Raiders right now, he would be the starting quarterback. So thank you, Josh McDaniels. It's the only time you're going to hear me say that. Yep. Yeah, I don't think it's the Saints. I honestly think it's going to be the Bucs. Is going to win the NFC South.
I don't know.
It's either the Bucs or the Falcons for me.
It's one of the two.
I've got on Atlanta, and it's not because I'm a Falcons fan.
Fair enough, but the problem is they're the Falcons, and they will falcon. It's just what they do.
Yeah.
Just like the Chargers. Until proven otherwise, the Chargers will charger.
That's right.
Yep. Same
all right, last one. NFC West, Seattle Seahawks, 3-0. Second best defense, yards allowed right now.
Contenders.
Like what is the craziest statistic? So obviously they play the Steelers too, and they're 3-0. That the Broncos opponents that they played in the last 2 weeks are combined 8-1. Something to file away. And so I mean, and of all the teams that they played, in the first 3 weeks, who were the pretenders? I mean, they played 2 pretenders. One was not the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are legit. And I think Mike McDonald is actually going to put his name in the ring for Coach of the Year, not just rookie Coach of the Year, but just rookie or just Coach of the Year. He's coaching them up defensively, and I think in doing so, it's actually helping out Geno Smith to kind of help protect the ball a little bit better. He did have 2 interceptions and everything. I think where it does get to the point where they could be pretenders is the play of Geno Smith. Does Geno Smith have it within him to carry the Seahawks with those playmakers and everything? But I think right now, and specifically as we all know, in a very weak conference, I'm definitely going with the Seahawks as contenders.
Well, and
I'm a Geno Smith apologist, honestly. I think that he has top 10 quarterback potential in the NFL, and he has shown that he can play at that level. The defense is playing lights out. Mike McDonald is doing such a phenomenal job with that unit. I feel like the Seattle Seahawks can go very, very far, especially we're seeing their division not really be as strong as we thought it was. Arizona Cardinals, they put together a couple of good games, but they couldn't put it together against Detroit. They couldn't close out that game against Buffalo. They put an absolute clobbering on the Rams. That was impressive. The Rams got that big win against the San Francisco 49ers, and San Francisco is kind of maybe showing some Super Bowl hangover signs a little bit.
We want to talk about pretenders there.
Yeah. This could be a sign here that the Seattle Seahawks are coming, and they could be surprise contenders to win the NFC West.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the Carolina Panthers obviously have allowed the most points in the NFL so far. Who's second?
Dallas
Anybody?
Cowboys?
Nope.
Is it the 49ers?
Nope. So the Panthers have allowed 95 points. The Rams have allowed 91.
Wow.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Then you've got the Cowboys at 89.
Cowboys are shit, man. Mike Zimmer's defense is so outdated. It's ridiculous. I mean, bro. The Cowboys will always be the same old Cowboys as long as Jerry Jones is there. They are the kings of being complacent.
That is Mike Zimmer. That is defensive analyst on this Colorado Buffaloes, Mike Zimmer, by the way.
He was there for like one game, according to his own words.
Yeah. So, no, it's he's got an outdated defense, and I
kind of like Pat Shurmur's offense.
Exactly. Who runs
Go hand in glove.
Yeah, but you gotta hand it to Shurmur. It seems like they called a pretty good game as soon as they realized that the defense was actually getting it together. No, I think that it's going to be really interesting for the Cowboys, and as things progress, like I think the one thing we should at least of note here is that I think the last couple teams that they played had history with Zimmer, if I remember right. And so I think it was just kind of like bulletin board material for them. So I think that it'll be interesting, as things progress, but they always kind of compete till the very end. So something of note, they always compete to the very, very end. And can they get over the hump? That is just, again, something so, and maybe that's one of the reasons why when we did our tiers at the beginning of the year, that's why it was always one of those themes like, are they pretenders? Are they contenders? And, I made the executive decision to say that they're pretenders, and that's just because of their playoff history. And they are true pretenders in every say of the word, for what we've seen in their history.
They're the kings of being pretenders.
Somebody's car is getting stolen.
GTA.
Yep.
So in regards to the Dallas Cowboys and to I almost said St. Louis, Los Angeles Rams and the Carolina Panthers, before the Red Rocket came in there and lit it up.
Absolute booty cheeks.
Just horrible, horrible teams. Yeah, Andy Dalton, dude. Woo! You see how bad Bryce Young was? Wow.
Yeah, it's just
over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's a bad organization. It's just a really bad organization. Tepper is the new is the new Dan Snyder. I mean, it's just a poorly run organization. And I think that, it's going to get to the point where once again, the Panthers have to make the hard decision and move on from Bryce Young. And I guarantee you, based on the history, Bryce Young will go to a team and you will actually get a chance to see him flourish. and you will get a chance to see him be the number 1 overall pick that we saw, or the shades of the number 1 overall pick from, and again, it goes to show you the unfortunate nature of having the number 1 overall pick.
The Panthers will become just like the Bears, draft a number 1 overall quarterback, or at least top 5, top 10, and just ruin him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the unfortunate nature. It is what it is. I mean, you can't deny the fact that they got to do and select these quarterbacks, but environment and team is a big, big deal. I mean, Justin Fields is playing better. It's one of the reasons why just the environment with everything that he had in Chicago was just a terrible environment. And Caleb right now is starting to see some of that. Like, it's a bad environment right now with Chicago. Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold were big reasons they didn't play well for sure, but like that environment was just disgusting.
Turns out when you don't have Matt Eberflus and you have a good offensive line, you don't suck.
Right.
Just throwing that out there. All right. Anything else that we need to cover, or did we get it all?
I think we got it all.
Is also to make sure you go vote because I think that Bo Nix and Dondrea Tillman are up for Rookie of the Week. So make sure you get your votes in.
Ooh, is he going to get it over Jaden Daniels though? Honest question.
I don't know. Doubt it.
Well, one's in the NFC, one's in the AFC. So
facts. Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if it was just one for the whole thing or per conference.
I think it's AFC, NFC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there we go. All right, so that's going to about do it for us. We appreciate every single one of you that joined us in the chat. It's been a fun show. Love hearing all your opinions and all your takes. Make sure you check out all the other shows on the MHRT Network, as well as the Orange and Blue Network, who we are now partnering with, doing shows on both channels. So make sure you check those out. Shows on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the neighborhood on game days. Also, make sure you check out Broncos Syndicate with Gage Madrid out there on YouTube. Are you on Facebook too, or just YouTube?
Nope, just YouTube.
Just YouTube. Make sure you go check that out. He's got a lot of breaking news as well as detailed stories on things such as will Zach Wilson be traded, or this guy came in for not an audition, tryout, different things like that. Make sure you go check that out. Very informative. It's where I get all my information from. So Gage should just host the show from now on, and then I don't have to watch all these videos. But again, we love all of y'all. We love the Broncos. We will see you guys next week. Go Broncos! Kick the crap out of the Jets and stupid Nathaniel Hackett. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down 'cause